Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Monday, August 26th, 2024. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today. Israel and Hezbollah trade heavy fire across the border. So early on Sunday, it was late Saturday night here on the east coast of the U.S. when this started. Israel announced that it was launching strikes against Hezbollah in Lebanon and carried out what appeared to be its largest bombing of southern Lebanon since the start of Israel's genocidal campaign in Gaza. The Israeli military said that 100 fighter jets launched strikes against 40 targets, and Israel is claiming that it destroyed missile launchers that were aimed at northern and central Israel, although you have Hezbollah denying that claim and saying that most of the strikes hit empty areas. So shortly after Israel launched its attack, Hezbollah announced it was starting its retaliation for the assassination of Fuad Shukr, a Hezbollah commander who was killed by an Israeli airstrike in Beirut on July 30th. So yet Israel announced that it was launching these big strikes. They called them preemptive strikes. They said they had intelligence that Hezbollah was planning something big. And then right after that, Hezbollah put out an announcement saying they were launching a major attack in retaliation for that assassination. Hezbollah said that it launched dozens of drones and more than 320 Katyusha rockets into Israel. They still haven't used their ballistic missiles, as far as I'm aware, but they fired quite a few rockets in this attack. The Israeli military said that it thwarted the Hezbollah attack, but Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah claimed the operation was a success and hit its intended military targets. So you kind of have both sides claiming success and victory and downplaying the damage done by the other side. So we had this exchange of fire, which does look like it was the heaviest so far of this conflict between Hezbollah and Israel, which started after October 7th. The reported casualties are relatively low. We've seen more casualties in some of just the daily airstrikes that Israel has been launching in Lebanon. Lebanese officials have confirmed that 3 people were killed in Lebanon. And I mean, just on Friday, Israel launched a round of airstrikes that killed 10 people in Lebanon. An Israeli soldier aboard a naval vessel was killed, and 2 others were hurt during the Hezbollah rocket and drone barrage. But the Israeli military believes that they were hit by shrapnel from the Iron Dome missile defense system. So it wasn't Hezbollah rockets that hit them. It was Israel's air defense system. So again, relative to what we have been seeing, low casualties in this attack. Nasrallah said that the main target of Hezbollah's attack was the Unit 8200 intelligence base in northern Tel Aviv and air defenses in central Israel. He accused Israel of lying about intercepting the attack, saying that, quote, a significant number of drones hit their intended targets, but the enemy is keeping all relevant details concealed, but the days and nights will reveal the truth of what happened there, end quote. So he also said that Hezbollah is going to monitor kind of, the aftermath of these attacks. And if they find it was enough, if they found that enough damage was done, then that would be sufficient for their response to the killing of Shukr. Basically saying, if we're happy with it, that'll be it. That'll be our retaliation. But he is also leaving open the possibility, saying that Hezbollah, if they're not happy with the attack, he was kind of vague. He didn't define what would satisfy them, but he said if it's not satisfactory, then Hezbollah reserves the right for another major attack in response to the Shukr killing. So Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also claimed success, but said the strikes on Lebanon were not the end of the story. He said the Israeli military, quote, destroyed thousands of short-range rockets, and all of them were aimed at harming our citizens and our forces in the Galilee, end quote. So again, you see both sides claiming success, and things kind of calmed down after this barrage. There was a report in Reuters saying that through intermediaries, Israel and Hezbollah, expressed that that they don't want things to escalate. So we'll see what happens. This doesn't mean that these daily strikes across the border are going to stop. I think that's going to continue. But, when this first started, it looked like it could have really turned into something. But again, you have low casualties, both sides downplaying it, but also claiming success. Doesn't look like either of them are going to escalate, at least for now. I mean, you did also have Netanyahu saying that it's not the end of the story, so you never know what could happen. So the U.S. was involved in this. We'll get more into that in the next story, but an Israeli source told Axios that Israel informed the U.S. ahead of its strikes on Lebanon. And, of course, the U.S. has deployed all these military assets to the region. Israel said that it acted alone against Hezbollah when it comes to actually launching the strikes, but they did get some support from the U.S. The next one here, the U.S. helped Israel track Hezbollah rockets and drones. So a U.S. official told Al Arabiya that the U.S. helped Israel track Hezbollah rockets and drones that were fired into Israel on Sunday morning. The official insisted the U.S. assistance did not go beyond intelligence, saying that the U.S. was not involved in the strikes on Lebanon and did not intercept any Hezbollah rockets or drones. After Israel began bombing Lebanon early Sunday, Hezbollah announced it was launching its retaliation for the assassination of Shukr, which I just went over that. And so the U.S. and Israel are still preparing, according to U.S. and Israeli officials, they're still preparing for Iran's retaliation for the Israeli killing of Hamas's political chief, Ismail Haniyeh, who was killed by Israel in Tehran. So they're expecting that might happen. It looked like Iran was waiting for the ceasefire talks to develop. Doesn't look like there's any progress on that front. There were some talks in Cairo on Sunday, but everybody's gone home, and it doesn't seem like there was really any progress, as far as I know, at this point. And Hezbollah, Nasrallah said that they waited for their retaliation to give the ceasefire talk some time. So as part of this effort, this planning between the U.S. and Israel, General Charles Q. Brown, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who's the highest level U.S. Military officer, he made a surprise trip to the Middle East. He arrived in Jordan on Saturday, and in an interview with Reuters, he said that he planned to discuss with regional officials, the things that they have to do to de-escalate and deter escalation. So this is what you have the U.S. saying, that they don't seek escalation. They're trying to cool things down, but they're also continuing to provide Israel, the most belligerent actor in all of this. They're also continuing to give them military aid and backing them and saying, we're going to defend you, no matter what happens here, we're going to defend you from Israel. And they're also saying, if things, say with Hezbollah, really escalate into a full-blown war, the U.S. is also saying, basically, maybe not outright saying it, but they are saying that they're going to defend Israel from Iran and any of its allies in the region. So that would apply to Hezbollah if things, say they started really firing some missiles and really hitting targets in Israel. So we'll see. There's some reports saying Iran might do something in the next few days, but we don't know. We've seen all sorts of predictions and things. So, only time will tell if Iran is going to do anything. All right, so the next one here, Israel forces Palestinians to live in just 11% of Gaza. So this article is from Kyle Anzalone. So Israel has limited the area that Palestinians in Gaza can live in to just 11% of the Gaza Strip. So this is just such a tiny area for the 2.2 million people who live in Gaza. According to the UN, the Israeli Defense Forces issued a series of evacuation orders to Palestinians, pushing them into two overcrowded areas, Muwasi and Deir al-Bala. The total area of the regions dubbed humanitarian zones in Gaza is about 15 square miles for over 2 million people. They're just squeezing them everywhere. So this is just, we've seen this as they're creating, conquering territory in Gaza as well by creating that buffer zone around the border, holding on to the Netzarim corridor, and they're creating other corridors, it looks like, in northern Gaza. And what they do there is they demolish all the buildings and they start establishing military outposts. And they've been ordering, over this weekend, they ordered more evacuations and just continue to bomb Gaza. So the slaughter continues. And the next one here, Israeli attacks kill 28 across Gaza Strip, victims still under the rubble. This one is from Al Jazeera. It says at least 28 people have been killed in Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip since dawn on Sunday, as a weekend of devastating strikes on the enclave continue. Medical sources gave the updated death toll to Al Jazeera, adding that the attacks had taken place across Gaza. The attacks bring the death toll since the start of Saturday from Israeli attacks in Gaza up to 71, with 112 injured. Victims are still also believed to be under the rubble, with ambulances and civil defense crews unable to reach them. So at least 8 were killed in Deir al-Balah. And there's some children reported killed here. And it's just again, the strikes are across Gaza. There's just no relief for anyone here. And the next one, a baby is paralyzed in Gaza's first case of type 2 polio for 25 years. This article's from the New Arab. A 10-month-old baby, which, that means that baby is as old as this slaughter that's been happening inside Gaza. It's been over 10 months now. It'll be 11 months come September 7th. A 10-month-old baby in war-shattered Gaza has been paralyzed by the type 2 polio virus, the first such case in the territory in 25 years, the World Health Organization said on Friday, with UN agencies appealing for urgent vaccinations of every baby. The type 2 virus, while not inherently more dangerous than types 1 and 3, has been responsible for most outbreaks in recent years, especially in areas with low vaccination rates. UN agencies have called for Israel and Hamas to agree to a 7-day humanitarian pause amid Israel's 10-month-old military offensive to allow vaccination campaigns to proceed in the territory. UNRWA said, again, they're calling for a humanitarian pause, outside of any sort of hostage deal, just pause so they can treat this. And so this baby lost movement in his lower left leg. Baby's currently in stable condition, but of course this is just gonna get worse. And this is part of the whole thing, is the hunger as well as the disease and the unsanitary conditions, just living in sewage, and a lot of skin diseases, skin rashes. Hundreds of thousands of kids have some sort of skin diseases. Just a complete nightmare for the children and their parents who, if their parents are still alive. All right, so the next one here, freed Israeli captive Noah Argamani says she was wounded by Israel. So this article is from Middle East Eye. Noah Argamani, an Israeli woman freed from Hamas captivity in June, said on Friday that her injuries were caused by an Israeli airstrike during her rescue operation, not by a Hamas attack. Speaking to diplomats from G7 countries in Tokyo on Wednesday, Argamani detailed her ordeal after she was taken captive by Palestinian armed groups during the October 7th attack. However, 2 days later, she issued a statement on Instagram saying that some of her remarks had been misquoted and taken out of context. Contrary to some Israeli media reports, Argamani clarified that she was not beaten or had her head shaved by Palestinian fighters. She wrote, quote, "I cannot ignore what happened here over the past 24 hours, taking my words out of context. Hamas members did not hit me while I was in captivity, nor did they cut my hair. I was injured by the collapse of a wall caused by an Israeli Air Force pilot. As a victim of October 7th, I refuse to be victimized once again by the media," end quote. So Israeli media took her comments out of context, I guess, and she set the record straight there. And this is something, the hostages in Gaza of course, the biggest threat to them is the Israeli airstrikes, because Hamas isn't going to want to kill them, and that's their leverage. So this is what we've seen from many of the hostages who have gotten out, saying that they were most scared of the Israeli bombings. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. kills a member of Hurras al-Din in Syria. So the U.S. military said on Friday that its forces launched a strike in Syria that killed Abu Abd al-Rahman al-Maki, who is described as a senior leader of Hurras al-Din, an al-Qaeda offshoot that operates in northwestern Syria. U.S. Central Command said in a press release, quote, Hurras al-Din is an al-Qaeda-associated force based in Syria that shares al-Qaeda's global aspirations to conduct attacks against U.S. and Western interests, end quote. CENTCOM did not offer any details on the strike. According to the UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, the strike targeted al-Maki while he was on a motorcycle in the countryside of Syria's northwestern Idlib province. He was described as a Saudi national and a former commander in a jihadist organization, and says that he served as a religious official for various jihadist organizations. So Idlib, this province, is mainly controlled by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, which is another al-Qaeda offshoot that is considered the most powerful of the remaining anti-Assad militant groups. So HTS's leader, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, previously led the al-Nusra Front, which was al-Qaeda in Syria. So al-Julani and HTS, really in an effort to gain international and Western support, they claim that they're no longer affiliated with al-Qaeda. They said that they cut ties with them, I think, back in 2017 or 2018. And HTS has fought against Hurras al-Din, which includes fighters who were previously members of HTS and other predecessor al-Qaeda groups. So there was all sorts of, I can't think of all their names, but you had al-Nusra Front turned into a few different organizations before it became Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which again, this has been, they've been helped by the Western media kind of whitewashing al-Julani, even though HTS and al-Julani are designated as terrorist groups by the U.S. and he was the leader of al-Qaeda in Syria, and this is who controls most of Idlib. And so the reason why I'm mentioning all this when we talk about this is that HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, is tacitly backed by Turkey. Turkey has cooperated with them, has fought on the same side of them at certain points. Turkey and these Turkish-backed militant groups, and kind of by extension, they're tacitly backed by the U.S. still, because I think the U.S. wants to keep, however, as much territory as it can out of Assad's hands. So they're probably happy with this situation in Idlib, even though it's ruled by this Islamist group, HTS, al-Qaeda affiliate, and former al-Qaeda leader. So it's just kind of interesting. And the U.S. has not targeted HTS in recent years. They've only gone after Hurras al-Din. Occasionally, the U.S. launches drone strikes in northwestern Syria against Hurras al-Din. I haven't seen one in a little while, but last year in 2023, they were doing it a little more often. So it's just, it goes to show what a mess the U.S. occupation and policy in Syria is. Here you have, it's like there's all these al-Qaeda guys, but some al-Qaeda guys that are kind of backed by the U.S. and its allies, and the other ones the U.S. is bombing. It's just such a mess. The U.S. just has to get out of there. But it's just another kind of drone war that the U.S. is involved in that many people are unaware of. All right, so the next one here, at least 3 killed in Israeli airstrikes on central Syrian city of Hama. So on Friday evening, Israeli warplanes carried out a series of attacks on 4 different targets in and around the provinces of Hama and Homs in central Syria. The attacks targeted Syrian air defenses and sites believed to have a non-Syrian militia presence. Reports from the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights were that at least 3 people were killed. Some of them were identified as pro-Iran militias, which means the Shia militias. 10 other people were wounded. Syrian media reported that at least 7 of the wounded were civilians. They also added that some of the missiles fired by the Israeli warplanes were intercepted during the course of the attack. So more Israeli airstrikes in Syria that happened on Friday. A lot of this stuff gets overshadowed by, of course, the slaughter in Gaza, the airstrikes in Lebanon, but I think it's important to cover all the different things that are happening in Syria. I mean, again, talk about the mess of that is Syria, U.S. and Israeli intervention in Syria. Remember a few weeks ago, I think that there's some more fighting going on between the Arab tribes and the U.S.-backed Kurds in eastern Syria. So the U.S. was giving them some air support. The U.S. recently bombed some of the Shia militias. They bombed them in Iraq, but it was over an attack in Syria. And then they're also drone bombing northwestern Syria, while it's just such a disaster. And, Turkey's on, against the U.S. in one corner because they consider the U.S.'s Kurdish allies terrorists, but then they're also backing the opposition in northwestern Idlib, which is Al-Qaeda. Again, just such a mess. Like, man, if it's not a case for the U.S. to withdraw and not be involved, then I don't know what is. All right, so the next one here, France arrests the CEO of Telegram. So this is a pretty big story that happened over the weekend. French authorities have arrested Pavel Durov, the CEO of the messaging app Telegram, over allegations that the platform is not doing enough to moderate its content. So this arrest, of course, has chilling implications for free speech, for freedom in general, in France, in the EU. This occurred on Saturday night when Durov arrived in France on a jet that left Azerbaijan. Durov was born in Russia, but he left in 2014 and now has citizenship in France and the UAE. And Telegram is based in Abu Dhabi in the UAE. That's where he lives mainly. But again, he does have citizenship in France as well. So according to reports, France is accusing Durov of not doing enough to curb criminal activity on the app. And Telegram put out a statement in response to his arrest and said, quote, It is absurd to claim that a platform or its owner are responsible for abuse of that platform. Telegram abides by EU laws, including the Digital Services Act. Its moderation is within industry standards and constantly improving, end quote. So on Sunday, French judicial authorities extended Durov's detention, and according to AFP, so they could keep him detained for questioning for up to 96 hours, which is a long time. And then after that, the judge can decide to free him or pursue charges and keep him behind bars. So Telegram is a huge messaging service and, kind of acts as a social media platform as well. I don't really use it too much. I use it to message some people, but stuff like, this makes me want to start using it more. But Telegram has over 900 million users worldwide and is widely used in Russia and Ukraine, where it's relied on as a source of information on the war. Durov was recently interviewed by Tucker Carlson a few months back, and he said some interesting things. He said that he left Russia after the Russian government was asked for personal information about users of VK, which is a social media site similar to Facebook that Durov founded in 2006. And he said he wouldn't do it. And according to him, what he told Tucker was that he was essentially given a choice by the Russian government, either, hand over the information that we want or sell the company and leave Russia. And he said he chose to sell and leave Russia. He also said in that interview that he had faced pressure from the FBI during visits to the U.S. He said that during one visit, one of his engineers was approached by the U.S. government officials who wanted to hire him as part of an effort to give the U.S. a back door into Telegram to access user data. And that, this is one reason why the U.S. probably doesn't like Telegram, because the U.S. intelligence agencies have all this backdoor access to Facebook, Instagram. There's plenty of examples. The the U.S. intelligence agencies, the FBI, the NSA, can get into these platforms. According to Tucker Carlson, they surveilled his communication on Signal as well, which is an encrypted messaging app. So if they can't get, if they don't have that backdoor to Telegram, that means that they probably don't like Telegram. And that could be another reason why that's probably another reason why the U.S. has tried to crack down on TikTok as well. So the French government or the authorities haven't put out like really an official statement. I think they might put out one on Monday, but we'll see how this plays out. All right, so the next one here, Chinese and Philippine vessels collide in the South China Sea. Chinese and Philippine Coast Guard vessels collided for the second time within a week near the Sabina Shoal in the disputed South China Sea. So Sabina Shoal is part of the Spratly Islands and is claimed by China, the Philippines, Vietnam, and Taiwan. Chinese and Philippine vessels typically encounter each other near Second Thomas Shoal, which is about 35 miles west of Sabina Shoal. So these two collisions near Sabina within less than a week signal that this conflict, is kind of expanding in the South China Sea. This is another spot that this hasn't really happened here before, and now it happens twice within a week, so it's not a good sign. And this comes after China and the Philippines said that they reached an agreement on easing tensions, but it doesn't look like it's worked. So, of course, the two sides traded blame for this one. Again, China blames the Philippines, say that they intentionally caused the collision, and the Philippines are blaming China. China is saying that they were trying to, they were entering the waters illegally. That's what they always say. So this is a dangerous area, something to keep an eye on, because the U.S. has given the Philippines very strong support in this maritime dispute, and they say that the U.S.-Philippine Mutual Defense Treaty applies to attacks on Philippine boats in the South China Sea. That means the U.S. is pledging to the Philippines that if their boats come under attack, come under fire, that the U.S. would intervene. So when we see these collisions, it's not good when the U.S. is this involved. And, after the last crash, I'm sure it'll happen again. When these things happen, the U.S. always, calls the Philippines and says, hey, just want to reiterate, blah, 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 our commitment to the Mutual Defense Treaty. All right, so the next one here, Russia expects the U.S. to support long-range strikes. So Russia's ambassador in the U.S. has said that he expects the Biden administration to soon lift restrictions on Ukraine's use of U.S.-provided weapons to support long-range strikes on Russian territory. So Ambassador Anatoly Antonov said on Friday, quote, "The current administration behaves like a person who extends one hand and holds a dagger behind their back with another one. They are essentially laying groundwork for a decision to simply remove all the existing restrictions at a certain point without much thought," end quote. So back in May, President Biden gave Ukraine the green light to use U.S.-provided weapons in Russian border regions. A few months later, Ukraine launches this invasion of Kursk, and they're using U.S. weapons, U.S. missiles, U.S. bombs inside Russia. The U.S. says it doesn't want them launching long-range strikes, but Russia thinks they're probably going to allow it. This might be the next big escalation of the proxy war. And Ukrainian officials are really pushing hard for this. There was an interesting quote from an official speaking to Politico. So Politico had this report about how the White House is saying that they're not ready to support long-range strikes, which I don't really like that wording, because them saying that they're not ready means that at some point they will be ready. And this has been the pattern of this proxy war. No, we're not going to send jets. We're not going to send tanks. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. But then they end up doing everything. So this one Ukrainian official told Politico, quote, "There's some indication now that Biden might want to do something big on Ukraine, maybe lifting some of the restrictions before the election now that he's not running. There's no guarantee, but we're hearing that he's thinking about it," end quote. So definitely, man, I mean, if Ukraine really starts launching, a few hundred miles into Russian territory using U.S. missiles, man, I mean, it's just, again, it's just crazy that we've gotten to this point where we're at. All right, so the last story here, Shin chief condemns Jewish terrorism in the West Bank. So this article is from The Guardian. The head of Israel's security agency, Shin has warned the country's leaders that Jewish terrorism in the West Bank is out of control and has become a serious threat to national security. Ronen Bar issued the warning in a letter to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the Attorney General, and members of the Israeli cabinet, some of whom are outspoken backers of the extremist settlers responsible for the escalating violence. Barr's letter, sent last week but published by Israel's Channel 12 News on Thursday night, has highlighted the wide gap between the far-right wing of Netanyahu's coalition and Israel's security apparatus. So just some interesting quotes here. And again, members, most notably is Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, who are settlers themselves who want to annex the West Bank. Ben-Gvir is the one always going to the Temple Mount, Al-Aqsa Mosque, what the Israelis call the Temple Mount in occupied East Jerusalem. So Barr is saying that the actions of the settlers should not be described as criminal, but it should be described as terrorism. He said, quote, "It isn't crime because it's the use of violence to create intimidation, to spread fear. That is terror," end quote. He says it's a large stain on Judaism. And this is, it is always what I call the settler attacks. It is terrorism. A lot of times, there's cases where they'll break into people's houses at night with guns and tell them that they're going to kill them unless they leave their houses because they want to take their land. They want to steal their houses and take their land. So, terrorizing people to get them to leave is their strategy. And similar strategy at a bigger scale, back in 1948. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from James Carden. In Chicago, the blob rules. One from Ted Snyder. Caution, red line crossing. One from Ramzi Baroud. Prolonging genocide as a smokescreen. Israel's other war in the West Bank. One from Joseph Solis Mullen. How Taiwan became an issue. And one from Kelly Vlahos. What ceasefire? So that is everything for me for today. I hope everyone had a good weekend. I want to remind people this Saturday, the Ron Paul Institute conference in Washington, D.C. If you're interested in going, if you want to see Ron Paul, Dan McAdams, John Mearsheimer, Judge Napolitano speak, and you're in the area, or if you feel like traveling, go get a ticket. I put the link in the description. But if you want to support this show, tell your friends about antiwar.com, share, like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. I'll be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.